evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on this, the 17th of March. Lael Fodrich, Sona Dave, to all our Irish viewers, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone else. I'm Douglas MacKenzie, bringing you stories from Scotland and around the world, and to discuss those stories in more detail, I'm joined by Ronnie Cowan, former SNP MP for Inverclyde. Welcome, Ronnie.
Evening, Douglas. Thanks for asking me.
We begin tonight with a Middle East update. At least 48,577 Palestinians have been killed and 112,041 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023, according to the Gaza Health Authority. An Israeli airstrike killed 3 Palestinian men, all from the same family, in Gaza today as they tried to gather firewood, medics said. Later, medics said an Israeli airstrike killed a father and his son inside sheltering displaced families in central Gaza's Buraish refugee camp near the site of the earlier airstrikes, raising the day's death toll to at least 5. There have been many more reports of Palestinians being killed by Israeli forces since the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, mediated by Qatar, Egypt and the US, came into effect on the 19th of January. Israeli tanks and armoured vehicles continued to be positioned around the occupied West Bank city of Jenin and Afref, according to Palestinian news agency Wafa. Wafa correspondent saying that Israeli bulldozers are levelling streets and widening others to allow for the entry of military vehicles. Benjamin Netanyahu has announced he will seek to dismiss the director of Shin Bet, Israel's internal security, through a cabinet vote later this week, in a move that will prompt further accusations of authoritarianism. The Israeli Prime Minister said in a video statement on Sunday that ongoing distrust made it impossible for him to continue to warn Bar, who has led Shin Bet since 2021. The US and Iran back in Yemen, both vowing escalation after the US launched a wave of deadly airstrikes on Saturday with the stated aim of deterring the rebel group from attacking Red Sea shipping. Officials said 53 people had been killed, including 5 children and 2 women, and that 98 people have been injured. The Red Sea port city of Hodeidah and the Al Jauf governorate, capital Sana'a, were said to have been targeted by fresh US airstrikes on Monday. In the early hours of Monday morning, the Houthi rebels said they had carried 2 missile drone attacks in 24 hours that included the USS Harry S. Truman, an American aircraft carrier Red Sea. These claims have not been confirmed on the record by Washington. US President Donald Trump warned today in the afternoon that Iran was responsible and face dire consequences for any further attacks by Yemen's Houthis. Tens of thousands of people in Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen on Monday following the deadly US attacks. Many demonstrated placards and assault rifles chanting "Death to America" at a huge protest in the capital Sana'a, while rallies held in Sada, Damar, Hodeidah and Amran. Iran will respond to Trump's invitation to talks after proper scrutiny, the Foreign Ministry said on Monday, accusing Washington of not matching actions with words. Well, Ronnie, it's unremitting bad news coming out of the Middle East, and doesn't seem to change today, but this now seems to be a bit of an escalation on the Americans' part.
Yes. Should we be surprised? They've been making noises for some time. You know, we can get stuck into Donald Trump's foreign policies and we can talk around them forever. But at the end of the day, we have a President of the United States who's making all sorts of rhetoric about what he wants to do with other countries and how he sees the United States' position as a sort of overseer of all that's right and good and just within the world. I know many years ago we might have actually believed that stuff ourselves, but it is very concerning. It's very concerning because the attitude which is coming out of the White House is very concerning because of the firepower and the money they have behind their military. And it's very concerning because history has told us that, particularly in that region, they're quite prepared to manipulate, develop wars to fund regimes when it's politically expedient for them to do so, whether it's the access to oil, access to water, or to undermine a system of government which they feel shows theirs up in a bad light. And it's not just with Donald Trump, it's been historical. But right here, right now, on the 17th of March 2025, I cast my eyes over that region of the world and the countries involved in it with real trepidation that something could escalate and escalate very, very quickly.
Yes, indeed. A story we'll keep coming back to. Next this evening, our regular Ukraine update. On this day, 1,118, the full-scale Russian invasion of the country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has appointed Andriy Ignatov as Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, replacing Anatoly Bargovich, who has been moved to Chief Inspector of the Defense Ministry. Ignatov, is a combat guy, Zelensky. His task is to bring more combat experience. Everything that our brigades have learned from the war should be implemented 100% at the planning level. Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustem Umerov posted, "We are systematically transforming the armed forces of Ukraine to enhance their combat effectiveness. This involves restructuring the command system and implementing clear standards." Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said Russia launched a drone attack on the city early today, adding that Ukrainian air defense units were responding. On Sunday, Kyiv said Moscow had launched 90 Iranian Shahed drones to 9 Ukrainian regions. Emmanuel has said France, the UK and other nations providing security guarantees for Ukraine after any eventual would not be aiming to deploy a mass of soldiers, but instead could send contingents of several thousand troops to key locations without needing Russia's permission. The French president insisted, under no circumstances can the Ukrainians make no concessions without having any security guarantees. Macron said Russia does not give the impression it sincerely wants peace. On the contrary, the Russian president is escalating the fighting and wants to get everything, then negotiate. Donald and Vladimir Putin are expected to discuss the deals by the US and Ukraine this week. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff said he thinks the two presidents are going to have a really good and positive discussion, and Trump really expects there to be some sort of deal in the coming weeks, maybe. Moscow said the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov and Marco Rubio agreed to remain in contact. Witkoff claimed Putin accepted the philosophy of ceasefire. However, Putin has been vague about what terms he would demand or accept. Late on Sunday, Zelensky said he had spoken with Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. The Prime Minister made the right points about how we need to step up pressure on Moscow, Zelensky said. The shadow fleet, the banking sector, we must impose all-out sanctions on everything that provides Russia with funding for its war. Only then can we force Putin to a just and lasting peace. Carney is in France today for talks with Emmanuel Macron that will cover the war in Ukraine before travelling to London to meet Sir Keir Starmer. On Sunday, Lithuania backed an EU proposal to pledge up to €40 billion in military aid for Ukraine this year and said a similar amount would also be needed in future years. While some EU countries have responded cautiously to the initiative, Lithuania's Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys said long-term military support for Ukraine should not depend on the outcome of any peace talks, as it was already clear it would need to maintain strong deterrence forces for Russians not to return. Lithuania spent 2.85% of GDP defence in 2024, according to NATO estimates, and has committed to raising that figure to 5% and 6% between 2026 and 2030. Alexander Grushko, Russian deputy minister, has told the Russian media outlet Izvestia, Russia would demand that NATO members exclude Ukraine from membership and that it will remain neutral as part of any peace deal. Well, Ronnie, you mentioned your comments on the first piece of Donald Trump making decisions for other countries. It seems that Ukraine is no different in that regard. And there was talk today that he was going to offer a deal to Putin for the United States to jointly control the Zaporizhzhia. Can we really hope for any peace to come out of his maneuverings?
Even just listening to your excellent summary of the situation there, it's an indication of just how complicated it is. It's not just Russia, Ukraine. It's not just Russia, Ukraine, USA. It's multiple countries. They're not even all located within the immediate geography of it because people have got interest in countries for all sorts of different reasons. Am I wrong in saying Trump said he was going to solve this war on day one? Was it Ukraine who was going to fix in day one? And obviously, that was an impossible task, but we'd used an impossible task. The only person that didn't seem to know that was Donald Trump. So we're in a situation now where he's making other promises he's going to make. And I hear Trump a lot when he's doing his press briefings. Did one recently, I think it was on board Air Force One. And it's very superficial. It's just his attitude is everyone's fine, everyone's great, this is the best deal ever, everything's going to happen, we're going to do this, and he keeps this sort of, you can see his relentless positivity up, but the situation requires real gravitas to understand incredibly complex issues at hand and bring a whole body of people forward at the same time in a controlled and organised manner, and it has to be constructive. You have to start doing it in a fashion that it can't then unravel on you. So you build it, and you make it solid, then you build again, you make it solid. And I don't think Donald Trump has ever operated any business, any negotiations in that sort of manner. So it's probably the last person who would choose to be where he is right now. But I've said this program before, a lot of the stuff that actually happens goes on in the background with people who are diplomats and negotiators who do get the complexities, who do understand what has to be done long run. They then go back to the political masters and say, look, can we make this happen? Can we offer this? Can we negotiate? Can we sit and talk with this person? And it's the people in the background that are doing the heavy lifting here. They're going to go back to Donald Trump or Putin and whatever else involved and say, look, here's a glimmer of hope. Here's something we can work on if we do this together and if we do it in a responsible fashion. It's then a question of, does that appeal to the powers that be? So I continue to say to myself, there are people in the background working on this. We don't know who they are. They've been in hotels somewhere. There were people meeting. There were things been organised. They've been broken into subgroups. So they'll be working very, very hard. And these are the people that ultimately will broker some sort of peace. But ultimately, the word has to be given to the likes of Trump and Putin that they have to be seeking peace rather than continuing to support a war.
Thank you. Turn now to what has been the main story in Scotland today, and Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited, CMAL, has announced that it intends to award the contract with the Small Replacement Programme, SVRP, to Remontowa Shipbuilding SA, Gdansk, Poland, following a 10-day standstill period. The project will construction of 7 fully electric vessels in the first phase, aimed at improving the resilience of the Clyde's ferry network and supporting island communities. The first vessel is expected to be delivered in 2027, with 3 additional vessels to be procured in phase 2 through a tender process later this year. After an initial exercise to identify suitable shipyards, 6 were invited to submit bids. 5 yards responded, and their proposals were assessed based on technical and financial criteria, with a 65% weight on technical expertise and 35% on price. Remontowa's bid scored the highest and was selected as the winning yard. Scottish Government Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Fiona Hislop, welcomed the milestone, highlighting that the new vessels will enhance connectivity for island communities and help reduce carbon emissions from Scotland's ferry fleet. She acknowledged the effort that went into the procurement process and hoped that contracts would be signed once the standstill period concludes. Ferguson Marine, a competitor in the bidding process, expressed disappointment at not being selected. The yard, based in Port Glasgow, argued that UK shipyards are disadvantaged by the price weighting in the bidding process, as competing yards outside the UK benefit from lower operating costs. Despite not winning, Ferguson Marine's bid was praised for its quality, and the yard remains optimistic about future opportunities, including receiving £14.2 million in capital investment from the Scottish Government to enhance its infrastructure. A Scottish Government spokesperson stated that while they understood Ferguson Marine's disappointment, they supported the yard's new business strategy and the investment aimed at improving productivity and capabilities. Well, Ferguson Marine is in your backyard, Ronnie. What's your view on the awarding of the contract to Gdansk?
I've worked with. You've got to understand the lay of the land here in Inverclyde. Just for anybody who doesn't quite understand, I was MP here for 9 years, so I like to think I do. Ferguson Marine builds ships in Inverclyde. Seamal commissioned the building of the ships, and they're based 200 yards away from Ferguson Marine up in Port Glasgow there. Caledonian McBrain, who operate the majority of the ferry services on the west coast, are located here in Europe. So we've got these three companies who are equally important to this area. They all have to succeed, they all have to prosper, and they have to employ local people for the benefit of this local community. We cannot get hung up on one. But what we cannot do is lose any one of them. They're all really, really important. The issues that arose around the building of the Sanox and the Rosa have, without any shadow of doubt, damaged the reputation of Ferguson Marine. We can go into them in great depth as to why they occurred, but here today they were in a bidding process for new vessels, and I can fully understand why people will look at that and say, "Do you know what? At this moment in time, we're just not quite comfortable to be the company to come along to offer you this 7 ferry deal." I would have liked them to have split it and said, "Okay, build 2, and we'll take 5 somewhere else. Build 3, we'll take 4 somewhere else," and give them that opportunity. But for commercial reasons, for the price of purchasing 7 may be a deal where you get a better price on them. I can understand why they haven't done that. I think maybe they should be a bit more public about that. But what we cannot do is find people today who are heavily critical of the whole process and are demanding that Ferguson Marine were awarded these contracts. And those same people who spent the last 8 or 9 years berating and undermining Ferguson Marine at every single opportunity. And if you undermine the confidence in a construction company, then you are partly responsible for it not getting successful bids in the future. You've said to people, look at all the mistakes they're making, look at what's wrong here. You've undermined it at every opportunity and not talked up the workforce, not talked up the good work that's happened, the way they've reshaped the yard, the way they've modernised it, the way they've redeveloped it. I've not heard any of that coming from the people who today, I saw that the news are saying, "Oh, this is an SNP disaster." They spent 9 years berating the SNP government. They spent 9 years and using it as a political tool to do just that. Had they been more supportive of Ferguson in the past, I can understand why they're saying, "Oh, we've supported Ferguson, they should be getting these contracts." But you cannot have it both ways. And I know from my years as the MP that the trade unions, JMB in the past, have said quite starkly to Alice Sarwar, "You cannot continue this rhetoric of undermining this yard. It is bad for us." And yet he continues to do it. They have continued to do it. And now they're shouting they should have got the business. So I don't think you can have it both ways. But the fact is, trying to be positive and looking forward, the yard is better equipped than it's ever been before. It's taken on lots of apprentices. We have to take on apprentices. We have to skill them up because the workforce in Ferguson, I mean, it's akin to my age, and I'm retired. And we're trying to hang on to people in there to pass that knowledge on to a younger generation. So we're doing that, which is healthy, and it will stand us in good stead in years to come. They're also outside. There's military contracts coming along. They've already been doing some work for BAE Systems up in Govan. We know that come to the offshore wind farms that have been proposed, they'll need support vessels. So I don't want Ferguson Marine to get hung up in the idea that the only thing they can do is build ferries. They have to be more diverse in what they want to do. And I believe as a yard they are. There may be not going to coverage on that today, but I believe as a yard they are looking to other contracts in other areas and not trying to keep all their eggs in one basket, if you will. And the good news is, as you touched on at the end there, we know that Calmac and Brain run a very good service. It gets criticised every time a ferry comes off. That's in the news. Their hit rate in running ferries on time and within their budgets is well over 90%. You don't get that many other places in the world. Yeah? But we've got to hear in Scotland, Calmac and Brain are doing that, but we know that their fleet is creaking. We know we have to replace it. So they'll be delighted, I'd imagine, that 7 new ferries are now going to start getting built so they can replace the fleet they've currently got. And that's a great thing to be happening. And the sooner we do it, the better. So we're looking to this to the future to say, Ferguson Marine, I hope we'll get some of the trunks of the next work that comes along, but I hope they don't believe that they can only go to one particular source for all their future work, and they diversify, and by doing that, they strengthen their bases of manufacturing concern here in Inverclyde. Because what we need is a yard that can compete on the open market, and hopefully that is what is slowly emerging out of Ferguson Marine.
Good, thank you. Yeah, we certainly did hear hypocrisy on steroids today in the criticism, but it's good to hear that both the Yard, the Scottish Government, and now you are quite upbeat about the Yard's future and in fact. So let's hope that is the case. Looking now at UK politics in general, and the SNP's Westminster leader Stephen Flynn MP has called on Keir Starmer to reverse planned cuts to disability benefits, warning that such measures will leave disabled people and vulnerable communities at risk of financial hardship. The challenge comes as reports indicate tensions within the UK Labour Party regarding cuts to public spending, including a proposal to reduce disability benefits by £5 billion. Labour's plans reportedly involve deep cuts of up to 11% in other public services. Critics, including Flynn, argue that these cuts will exacerbate poverty and undermine public services, particularly for disabled. Labour's fiscal policies, based on continued adherence to Tory-style spending rules, have drawn sharp criticism from multiple quarters. During the election, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves repeatedly denied that these rules would result in substantial cuts. However, within months of taking power, the Labour government increased national insurance employer contributions, reduced winter fuel payments, and imposed cuts on public services, and now are threatening cuts to disability benefits. The proposed cuts to disability benefits, which Flynn described as shameful, are set to affect many disabled people who already struggle with the rising cost of living. With inflation impacting everyday expenses such as energy, food, and healthcare, disabled people fear they will be left without sufficient funds for basic needs. Several figures within the Labour Party, including Diane Abbott and Andy Burnham, have also raised concerns about the impact of these cuts. Abbott described the cuts as not a Labour thing to do, while Burnham warned that tightening benefit eligibility or reducing payouts would push more people into poverty. As the Labour government prepares for a spending review, Flynn and others are calling for a change in course to protect the most vulnerable and prevent further damage to the social security system. With concerns mounting, disabled people across the UK remain anxious about the future of their benefits and financial security. It does seem bizarre, does it not, Ronnie, that in the 6th largest economy in the world, we can't find money to look after the disabled.
Yeah, and I'll come back to that point in a minute, but I was looking at this last week, and what the government are doing is they're flying kites. They're going to say, we're going to do this, and then they take a step back and just look at the public reaction to it. So they're already saying, well, we're not going to do to PIP what we said we would do to PIP. It's going to be slightly different. It's still going to be absolutely horrendous, but they're going to maybe water it in a little bit to try and bring a few more people inside. That's why they leak this stuff so far in advance. So last week when I was reading about what they're going to do, the number of people it's going to affect, I was reading something by Nye Bevan. There's a quote in it, and Nye Bevan being one of the Labour Party's stalwart many decades ago. And Nye Bevan said, "Illness is neither an indulgence for which people have to pay, nor an offence for which they should be penalised, but a misfortune, the cost of which should be shared by the community." And I look at that and think, what has the Labour Party become? Honestly. Now, I'm an SNP party member. I was an elected member of Parliament for the Scottish National Party. But in my 9 years at Westminster, when we found common ground with something, we were quite happy to go and do that. I worked with the Labour Party. I worked with the Conservative Party. There weren't that many Lib Dems there when I was there, but if I had the opportunity arisen, I would have. But I worked along with John McDonnell on the Select Committee. And John McDonnell was an MP who was very close with Jeremy Corbyn. I think he was deputy leader of the Labour Party. He was certainly the Chancellor in waiting in opposition. He's now suspended from the Labour Party, along with some others, because they're too Labour, they're too socialist. So they've been suspended from their own party. And he described this action last week as being tin-eared. Tin-eared, basically saying, you're not listening to what people are saying. You don't know what's good for anybody, and it goes on to say, what's the point of you being a Labour MP? And I would agree with John McDonnell. I agree with Stephen Flynn, obviously, a good guy, worked with him for a few years. But I think it's really strong when you hear people from the Labour Party themselves saying, do you know what? We have got this wrong, and this is not the Labour Party I thought I joined, or I was elected to represent. And it's strong for an MP to stand up and say, this is not a manifesto I stood on. I didn't say I was going to do this. So all the ones who have stood up over the parapets, they are few and far between. There's a few in there that I thought would be maybe more vocal about this. I'm going to say none in Scotland. I might be wrong on that. You might be correct me on that, but I'm not aware of any of the Scottish Labour MPs saying we have to vote against this. We have to change this. We have to protect people with this particular disability benefit, and there will be other benefits which are going to be drastically cut as well. So I'm sitting here in Inverclyde. We have areas of high deprivation and poverty. We also have to say areas of great wealth within Inverclyde. It's not always what it's made out to be in the media, but I understand and I know, and I've worked with people in my office the last 9 years who have come to me looking for help. So I know these people and I know what they're going through, and I know the work we've done in the past to help people access the system and understand PIP, which is an incredibly degrading process, which people have to go through again and again and again. People who've, the classic example, when people have lost their limbs have to get reassessed, as if they're going to grow them back over a period of time. So to target that, to make people go through the sort of degrading system, and with the threat that we really are, the message is we're coming after you. We think you should be back at work. We suspect that you're working a system. That's all the messages that are coming out, as opposed to saying, okay, let's sit down with you. Let's treat you like a human being and assess what we can do to help you. And if we can help you get back to work, we will. But that's under the criteria that you're fit to do it. That's not the message I'm getting from the Labour Party. It's all about the money we're going to save. And if you set out saying we're going to save that amount of money, then you cannot approach somebody's assessment in a rational fashion. You've already set out the criteria. The criteria is to save money. That's what they've said.
Yeah, I noticed today that a Labourman, and note a spokesman, not a minister and not the Prime Minister, said that the Labour Party had a moral and economic duty to sort out the benefit system. Yet this moral duty does not seem to extend to a wealth tax or to large-scale corporate tax avoidance.
The moral and economic duty is to make sure the welfare system is fit for purpose and supports those people who most need it at the time they most need it. It's not to make it more complicated. It's not to make it more punitive. I've spoken for years about universal basic income, and I know Andy Burnham, you mentioned earlier, has also been interested in universal basic income. That's the conversations we're having. That's them looking at a system which helps people and benefits people. They've gone out from day one to say, we're here to save money. Which to me tells you everything you need to know about what their morals are.
Thank you. Well, the Organisation for Economic and Development, the OECD, has warned that Donald Trump's trade policies are damaging global economic growth and hindering efforts to reduce inflation, particularly in the US, UK and Canada. In its latest economic update, the OECD downgraded global growth projections for 2025, cutting the forecast from 3.3% to 3.1%. The report highlighted how increased trade, particularly from Trump's planned tariffs, are negatively impacting the global economy. The OECD's projections also show a slowdown in growth in key economies, including the US, Canada, and Mexico. The imposition of tariffs, particularly a 25% levy on imports from Canada and Mexico, is expected to stoke inflation and reduce economic activity across the region. In response, the OECD warned that the fragmentation of global trade could further harm living standards worldwide. The report predicts Mexico will face a recession with a contraction of 1.3% in 2025 and 0.6% in 2026. Canada's growth forecasts have been almost halved, while the US will see its growth reduced to 2.2% this year, down from 2.5%. Growth in China is also expected to slow. With global economic uncertainty growing, the UK government faces pressure, particularly ahead of the spring statement. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has acknowledged the challenges posed by trade uncertainty and warned that the UK's growth prospects are under threat. However, the UK government says it remains optimistic that it can maintain stability and security. The OECD's outlook is presenting a stark reminder of the economic risks posed by escalating trade wars, highlighting the need for governments to work together to mitigate further damage. Well, not just the OECD, but I see the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the United States was saying today there was a fear of stagflation, stagnation, and inflation. So Trump is not popular with the economists, and it seems in U.S. politics, in Clinton's race, it's the economy, stupid. And can he carry on with this, or is there going to be a revolt? Do you think in terms, or will the backlash around the world affect him?
Okay, Douglas, you've lit the blue touch paper. You're, you're waiting for me to go off on one, and I very probably will. This all goes back to what the OECD is saying. I've got a wee quote from them later on, which maybe makes sense. This goes back to the fact that Donald Trump's has got a complete inability. He cannot engage in any meaningful conversations to develop progress because he constantly feels insecure. That's what Donald Trump is. And he requires to feel that he's winning absolutely everything. It's part of his personality. It's the reason he's bankrupt so many companies throughout the year. It's the reason the guy cheats at golf. He thinks he can get away with anything he wants to do because he is Donald Trump and he's branded himself as this thing. He doesn't understand that he could be wrong. And that's a dangerous thing. You don't understand that you can actually make mistakes. And he doesn't understand that his actions can harm the very thing he's trying to achieve. When you've lied and cheated your way to the position of President of the United States, then you don't do it alone. And that's what we now have is entitled, rich megalomaniacs wielding power to improve their personal situation with no regard for the fallout. The quote I saw from the OECD was he estimated that the OECD said an estimated outlook update that US households will pay a high direct price from the new import taxes, and the likely economic slowdown will cost the US more than the extra income the tariffs are supposed to generate. And the key to that quote to me is US households will pay a high direct price. Not Trump, not even the businesses. The businesses will be damaged. It will take longer for them to feel the effect. It will be the ordinary US citizens that are financially burdened first and foremost and to the greatest degree. The question is, does Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, care about that? I don't think he does, so I think he's running amok.
Thank you. And speaking of people who helped Trump get to the White House, Democratic senators have called for an investigation into possible conflicts of interest involving Elon Musk after his companies were linked to a key contract with the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. Senators Christopher Holland, Richard Blumenthal, Elizabeth Warren, Jeff Merkley, and Jamie Raskin have requested the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General and the Department of Justice investigate whether Musk violated federal conflict of interest laws. Specifically, the senators are concerned that Musk, in his role as a special government employee, may have influenced decisions related to a $4 billion FAA contract with Verizon, ultimately award to Musk's Starlink to help manage US airspace. The investment would assess whether Musk's financial interests in his companies, such as SpaceX and Starlink, have improperly influenced federal decisions. The senators also highlighted that some SpaceX personnel have reportedly started working at the FAA, and there are indications that Starlink has begun providing satellite kits to the FAA, although the company states these are offered for free. The senators raised concerns that such actions might constitute a conflict given Musk's significant financial stake in these companies. Musk's wealth, primarily derived from companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and X, has come under scrutiny, particularly in light of his ties to former President Trump. The Democrats have accused Trump of allowing Musk to leverage his government role to benefit his private interests, citing numerous instances where Musk's businesses have received federal funding or contracts, while regulatory oversight has been weakened. The senators have requested answers from the White House, including a pledge to reinstate fired government watchdogs, divest from private interests, and disclose financial information. However, as of now, there has been no response from Musk, Trump, or representatives. Well, it's all very well for them to ask for an investigation, but we've already heard many investigations which were underway before the election have been scrapped, and the effectiveness of the Department of Justice seems being weakened day by day. So, do you expect anything to come out of this, Ronnie?
So the questions I ask myself is who can actually investigate him? You know? Who still has the power? Who are the judges that will stand up to Trump? Because that's what you're talking about. It's not about Musk, it's about Trump. You know? Who's got the pockets deep enough to take on Musk in this situation? You know? Trump will support him. Trump has been the course before. He's a convicted felon. That doesn't bother him. You know, the day-to-day concerns that most people, I like to think, in public office have, where they want to do the right thing, that society should be caring, that people should be treated fairly, don't apply to Musk or Trump. They will get away with what they can get away with doing. When Trump's been quite open about that and things he's written and said in the past, you know, there are, I believe, many different definitions of narcissism. One of them is healthy narcissism, which means balanced self-worth. We're not talking about that with Musk and Trump. We're looking at exaggerated superiority, defensive and angry, attention-seeking behaviour, grandiose self-importance, and so on and so forth. You match that up with wealth and power, and it's a dangerous situation. And that's what we're looking at now. Should Musk be held to account? Of course he should be. I mean, even here in the UK government, during COVID, contracts were awarded, and all these years later, we're still asking the question: how did that happen? Who made that decision? You know, Michael Gove's been questioned about it now. What's taking so long? Will we get to the bottom of that? We have to be careful here that people in glass houses aren't throwing stones. The UK government's got a lot of questions asking itself about how it handles contracts as well and who made the money. Yeah? But it's a different scale when it comes to the United States. But the crime is the alleged crime, to save any lawsuits, the alleged crime is probably that exactly the same. It's people in power using their influence to line their pockets and their friends' pockets. So yes, you should be held to account. Yes, you should be investigated. But we don't have a great history of doing it in the United Kingdom. And I think it's almost impossible to believe that it will happen in the United States. I'm going to shut up before I get myself.
That's a very full answer. Thank you. Turning back to Scotland now, and First Minister John Swinney delivered the address at the Global Offshore Wind Investment Forum in Edinburgh today, highlighting Scotland's ambitions to lead in clean, secure energy. Speaking to an audience of senior business, energy and infrastructure leaders, Mr Swinney highlighted Scotland's unique position to capitalise on the growing offshore wind market. He outlined the potential value of Scotland's offshore wind sector, which could be £100 billion with full development, and emphasised the importance of strong environmental and industrial support in realising these opportunities. Mr Swinney explained that Scotland's combination of natural resources, historic experience in offshore energy, and world-class subsea engineering capabilities make it a prime location for offshore wind investment. He pointed to the country's pioneering role, with Scotland being home to the world's first commercial floating wind farm and leasing round for floating wind projects. He mentioned the operational success of the Seagreen and Moray West wind farms, both of which are setting global standards for offshore wind energy. In his speech, Mr Swinney stressed the importance of the UK government being willing to work with the Scottish government to create a stable, predictable investment environment. He highlighted collaborative efforts in areas like energy market reforms, grid access, and consenting processes, ensuring that investment decisions are based on certainty and clarity. He also discussed direct public investment, such as the Scottish Government's commitment of £500 million to support offshore wind infrastructure, including ports and manufacturing facilities. Mr Swinney's message towards Scotland's readiness to be a global leader in the green energy sector, with the potential to attract significant investment and create long-term economic benefits. He invited those attending the forum to be part of this transformative journey, emphasising the offshore wind industry as one of the greatest opportunities of the age. I'll come to you in a moment, Ronnie, but I'd like to just combine this with the next story, which is also about offshore wind. And the Scottish Government has approved up to £10 million in public investment for the redevelopment of the Port of Naig in the Highlands, aiming to boost the offshore wind sector. The investment from Highlands and Islands Enterprise will support the development of the port's inner East Quay, enhancing its capacity with a new heavy-duty quayside and roll-on, roll-off capabilities. This project, which requires formal approval from Global Energy Nig Limited, is designed to attract new businesses and investments while supporting Scotland's growing offshore wind industry. The initiative forms part of the Scottish Government's broader commitment to invest up to £500 over 5 years to strengthen the offshore wind supply chain. The Port of Naig, with its record in managing over 3.5 gigawatts of offshore wind assets, is a key site for the manufacture and assembly of wind energy components. Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes highlighted the strategic importance of the Port of Naig to the success of the offshore wind sector, realising that the investment signals to global investors that Scotland is open for business. A notable recent investment in the region includes Somo Electric Power Cables' decision to establish a £350 million high-voltage cable manufacturing facility, with Naig serving as its export site. This project was supported by £24.5 million from the Scottish Government, HIE and Scottish Enterprise, and is expected to create 330 jobs over the next decade. In addition to this, other recent investments aligned with the Scottish Government's offshore wind strategy include funding for XLCC, subsea micropile and new harbour facilities at Scapa Flow in Orkney. These initiatives are aimed at creating jobs and further investment in the renewable energy sector. Now, I noticed quite a number of people on social media accounts today saying that this was barely reported in Scotland, which is obviously a shame. And let me stress to anyone on social media, if you want to comment on any of the items in our program, you can use the Scotland at 7 hashtag, and we will broadcast them live during the program as they come in, but you can do it at any time. The other thing that struck me there Ronnie, was John Swinney's saying that this requires cooperation with the UK government, and most of what we seem to have heard from the UK government in recent Ed Miliband saying that he wants to site nuclear stations in Scotland. So there seems to be quite a gap between Scotland's renewables policy and the UK's policy to assess it.
Yeah, I mean, we already know that Scotland is a leader in clean, green, renewable energy. We're self-sufficient in electricity, but here we go generating more. So we've got, but this is for two reasons, I believe. One, we want to be exporting electricity, so we have to make more than we're going to use. And because the sort of technology we're talking about isn't just on the grid 24/7, you have to have a mixture of onshore, offshore, hydro, solar, biomass, tidal, and then you have to be able to manage that sort of feed into the grid and the storage of it so as you can supply it when it's at its greatest demand and reduce it when it's not. So it's a very complex business. Johnson is absolutely right. We have got the technology, we've got the geography. You know, we're very fortunate in that respect. We've got the geography and we've got the climate, which lends itself to the sort of technology we're talking about. Why would we want to ignore the incredible potential we have from just offshore and onshore wind, from tidal? The technology is improving all the time. I spoke of this 7, 8 years ago, and people were incredulous that we could even think about such a thing. But the technology is developing all the time. We've got to get some things going up in the Solway Firth. Scotland has got the geography and the abilities to really lead the world in this. So why would we want to have a discussion with Ed Miliband about incorporating nuclear energy, which other countries, notably Canada, are turning away from, and saying we don't want that industry because it's not clean, it's not green, it's not renewable. What it does is generates electricity. Yep, you can tap it 24/7, or you can control it so it's there on the grid. But the waste it generates will be literally digging a hole and burying it for generation after generation, for hundreds, thousands of years, to say, this is our waste, you take care of it. Now, in another country, a different situation, if they didn't have the natural resources we've got, I can see them saying, what else are we supposed to do? We don't have this wind and rain, we don't have the tide, we don't have the, what are we supposed to do? That's not a discussion we should even be having anywhere in the United Kingdom, especially not in Scotland. We have this opportunity, and if we can help develop the technology which can then improve and be used elsewhere in the world, where they don't have our natural resources, but the technology. Once upon a time, solar panels, solar power in the United Kingdom was not viable north of Manchester. Now we're using it absolutely everywhere because they're invested in and people saw it. It's not in itself, it's not the solution, but as part of a mix. These clean, green, renewable energies have to be invested in, and we have to develop them in a long-term strategy. That's why we're saying we have to look at the UK right now, because we're in the UK right now. But what we're developing is a energy grid which an independent Scotland will be able to benefit from by exporting it to other parts of Europe. And the investment in the Nig Bay is cracking. I only wish it's happening here in Inverclyde. And I know it's happening. I've been told in Worcestershire. I'd like it here in one doorstep. Thanks very much. We do have some facilities which I could take any minister around tomorrow if he wants to see. I'm sure there's open the doors to us. But it's important that beyond the hubs like Nig, that we have the supply chain in place to support all these structures, all these businesses, and not just the heavy engineering type stuff, the basic stuff, the people manufacture the small components, the people that supply the services to them. That's how an area really benefits from investment. It's not just what it put into Nig Bay, it's what grows off around it and how it then it stretches out into the surrounding communities as well. So there's a maximum benefit from it. That way you get more bang for your buck. If it's just, here's a pot of money, do one thing, and it's not been used properly, and I believe what John Someone is looking at is how we'll talk about Nig, but the support for it and the benefit for it can be felt throughout the larger areas of Scotland.
Yes, I'm sure, and it has been said many times on this programme that Scotland has the technology, the know-how, and as you say, the climate. What it doesn't have is control over energy policy. But staying with Scotland, and a Citizens Advice Scotland project with an additional £2.2 million in funding from the Scottish Government for advice and works with local authorities to improve the council tax debt collection practices, has already assisted over 1,600 people across 9 local council areas. The funding boost will extend the project nationwide, aiming to support more households in managing their debt. The project promotes an empathetic approach to debt collection, helping individuals who may face difficulties with digital access or need mental health support. The Scottish Government's Housing Minister Paul McLennan noted that debt, including council tax debt, can place significant pressure on family finances. He emphasised the importance of providing support with empathy and dignity. McLennan also highlighted the project's role in tackling child poverty, as it helps families manage their debts. Additionally, the Scottish Government is investing £6.9 billion in social security and £37 million to expand the free school meals programme alongside support through the Scottish Child Payment. The extension of the project reflects the Government's commitment to addressing financial challenges and ensuring that households facing debt are given the help they need. Well, I'm sure, Ronnie, you've heard many harrowing tales in your constituency surgery when you're an MP. So anything which can help people in these difficult situations has got to be good. I was speaking briefly before we came on air, and you that cuts to citizens' advice may make this a difficult service to provide in some areas.
Well, I know that Inverclyde doesn't have a Citizens Advice Bureau, so my immediate concern in reading the article about this was, if they're responsible for rolling this out, how does that affect us locally? That's always my first concern. But I know Citizen Advice, who are based up in Renfrewshire, have been very good in the past in supplying us with help and advice. Although we don't have an Inverclyde, I think we should have one in Inverclyde. We don't have it. Inverclyde Council, Labour Inverclyde Council are not interested. I think it's an important asset which would benefit of our community. And they'll say the one up in Renfrewshire has been very helpful in stepping forward in the past to give us help and guidance. But if we're going to roll this out across Scotland now, and all Citizens Advice Bureaus are going to have this task put upon them, because that's what this money is for. It's for people to use their expertise to give people in dire straits the guidance they require. It's not I'm going to put my hand in my pocket and give you money to pay your council tax. The Scottish Government have been doing that for years, and be criticised for doing that for years. So this is about giving help and advice. And my first concern, and maybe one phone call will allay that, is that we would need to have a Citizens Advice Bureau, a CAB here in Inverclyde, to fully benefit from the money that's coming along. If the people up in Renfrewshire are happy to allocate bodies to be dedicated to looking after Inverclyde, that would be great as well. So I've got a slight concern about how this will roll out in areas which don't have a CAB. There are very few. I think there's one or two in Scotland, maybe 3 now, who don't have a CAB. That's I'm talking council areas here. So yeah, it's a good thing to do, and it's also it's not a huge amount of money. It's obviously the budget they think is required to do the job, but crucially, absolutely crucially, when we're talking about trying to alleviate poverty, this is on the back of the investing £6.9 billion in social security for the year ahead, £37 million to expand free school meals programme, and continue to put more money in families' pockets through the Scottish Child Payment. And all of those individual programmes are required to help the people who are living at the most vulnerable end of our society. If this is another one, smaller one, but a strand which will help people make their money go further, or help them balance their books in the way that they pay their council tax, whatever it takes, then it has to be welcomed.
Yeah, thank you. And this is something perhaps where our viewers can help. Citizens Advice plays a very important role in helping people out. So if there's not one in your area, or if there is one in your area and you know something about it, well, please, again, use the Blue Sky messaging service and tell us about it. Protesters rallied on Saturday evening against pro-Russian rulers in Central and Eastern Europe. 50,000 people came out onto the streets in Budapest, where Peter Magyar, leader of the opposition Tisza party, which leads Viktor Orban in the polls ahead of the 2026 election, vowed to make Hungary part of a strong Europe and end Orban's 15-year rule. More than 100,000 people gathered in the Serbian capital Belgrade on the same evening in response to the call of students for a nationwide rally against the deadly train station awning collapse in Novi Sad that killed 15, which has been blamed on government corruption. President Vučić repeatedly warned the administration of supposed plans for unrest, threatening arrests and severe sentences for any incidents, widening the scope of the protest to a pro-democracy one. Around 15,000 people gathered in Piazza Victoriei in Bucharest for the Eurofest to proclaim Romania's place in Europe and the European Union, a commitment to democracy and opposition to fascism, a throwback to the 1930s politics recently espoused by now disqualified presidential candidate Calin Georgescu and to Russian influence. Do we have some video of this? No, perhaps we don't. The demonstration featured the creation of a heart for Europe when viewed from above, mobile phone illuminated pieces of blue and white paper achieving this. The anthem, the Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Symphony, was also played several times to applause. The reading from the stage of the Reuters report of 50,000 people in the streets of Budapest protesting against Viktor Orban received as loud a cheer as anything on the night. And the non-stop protests in Georgia against the Georgia Dream feature of power contested elections now in their 110th day. So I don't know how closely you follow events in Eastern Europe, but certainly it's not one-way traffic with Russian. There's plenty of pushback.
Yeah, obviously I welcome that. It's an area which you know far more about than I do, Douglas. It's a pro-democracy demonstration. My gut reaction is it has to be a good thing, and to see it happening in all those different countries. Hopefully, people are listening to what is being said. Hopefully, their politicians are listening and thinking, okay, this is something we get on board. Or if you've got the backing of the people of your country, then you can do great things. So why fight against it? Why try enforce a different regime if you're going to be faced with protesting on an ongoing basis? I just hope these people who are engaged in these protests right now are keeping themselves safe. We've seen a number of these things, these protests put down in the past in different countries. So I do have genuine concern that again that somebody can get overstep the mark and become heavy-handed in the policing of them. But I'm not aware of that happening. Maybe you can correct me on that. So for the people, I was just jotting down names there: Budapest, Bucharest, and Belgrade. If they can do this, then I'd hope that other countries and other people can lend their voice to support them as well and let them know that they don't stand alone. There'll be genuine interests in helping those countries to maintain their democracies and to develop their democracies, because we think it's good for them, and we also believe that it's a good thing for more Western Europe to see happening, and it makes us more secure as well. We've said we're working hard to help Ukraine remain a sovereign state. We can't take our eyes off the ball here and presume that's the only area which Putin's interested in. So early intervention, and it would be really, really good to hear that from world leaders to step in and say, we're not going to let this go any further, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of those countries who are involved in pro-democracy campaigns.
Yeah, well, the support will have to come from Western Europe, because sadly in Romania, support came from both Trump and Elon Musk for the fascist pro-Russian candidate Georgescu I alluded to. One thing was noticeable, though. I was at an earlier demonstration and trying to speak to mainly students. This was just after the first round of elections. And people would speak to me, but they were frightened to appear on camera. This weekend, it was a much wider spread of people at the demonstration. people who protested during the '89 revolution. One friend, to quote, had the shit beaten out of me by the miners in the Mineriad when the government pulled them in the '90s, and of course the students today. The people were far open. So at least the atmosphere is getting a bit better. Romania, we will wait and see what happens in the elections in May. Well, that's it for this evening's Scotland at 7. Thank you very much to our guest tonight, Ronnie Cowan, for his insight. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We were at 16,000 short of our funding rents in 2024, which has left us short of the money we need to pay our bills. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around 2,500. We have raised over £7 this year so far, but we still urgently need to raise at least £5,000 to pay our bills now. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you again to our guest. Thank you for watching wherever you are, either live or on catch-up. And please join us again for Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland tomorrow. For me, good night.